Trajectory of Betty's life would be seriously altered when she met a boy named John Mac Herring. Betty felt like she was falling in love with Mac, and from what I read, it seems like this was a little bit one-sided. She decided that she was gonna park with another boy, and Mac found out. He got very upset. He broke it off with Betty, and he ended up getting a new girlfriend who he started going steady with. This breakup crushed Betty's little heart and soul. She was also having some issues at home, and I believe it's because she started to act out. She was upset about Mac. She was all depressed. So her dad, you remember Papa Religion? He decided he was going to go through Betty's room. He ends up finding her diary, and he read it. He reads Betty's diary, and in Betty's diary, she kept some pretty detailed accountings of her parkings with boys, and her dad read this and freaked out, obviously, considering he's like against all of that. So her home life was also taking a hit. She just had nowhere she could go and like just be chill. She had nowhere to chill. So by the end of the year in 1960, Betty was not doing too well, and she started talking about, she even started asking people if they wouldn't mind helping her kill herself because she was too scared to do it alone. And when she would make these requests, everybody just kind of laughed him off and thought that she was joking. So one evening after one of the theater rehearsals, Mac, you remember Mac, her ex-boyfriend, Mac was actually giving Betty a ride home. During this ride home, Betty asked Mac if he would kill her. And she kept asking him, and she even went as far as writing him a letter this night that sort of like cleared him of all liability of killing her if he actually went through with it. The letter read as follows. March 20th, 1961. I want everyone to know that what I'm about to do in no way implicates anyone else. I say this to make sure that no blame falls on any other but myself. The following day, on the evening of March 21st, 1961, Betty was sitting in a car with a male friend when the two noticed some headlights pointing in their direction, and Betty recognized the car right away. It was Mac Harrington. She seemed happy and delighted that he had came. She said goodbye to this friend and jumped from his car into Mac's car wearing nothing but her little pajama shorts and a light jacket, and the two drove off into the night, and this was the last time that anyone other than Mac Herring would see Betty Williams alive again. The following morning, Mary Williams, Betty's mother, was making breakfast when she noted that it was a little bit odd that her daughter had not yet come down to eat breakfast and leave for school. So she went upstairs and found that Betty was not in her bed. So she was a little confused and thought, okay, maybe she left early for school. So she contacted the school and found that Betty had never arrived at school. So naturally she panicked and she called Odessa police in absolute hysterics to report that her 17-year-old daughter, Betty Williams, was missing. So police actually end up going to Betty's school that day, and they start questioning all of Betty's friends and acquaintances, and they did it just like they did in the movies. I never knew that this was actually a thing. I've never been in this situation, so I don't know if they still do it this way, but they literally like called each of them into the principal's office at school and started to question them. And in doing this, this is how they found that friend, the friend that Betty had been with the night before, who told police that the last time he saw her is when she had jumped into Mac Herring's truck at around 10:30 or 11 the night before, and he hadn't seen her since. So police think they're onto something because they're like, oh, ex-boyfriend's the last one to see her. Now she's missing. We should probably talk to this ex-boyfriend. And they call Mac in and they're like, yo, where's Betty? We know that you were the last person to see her, so where is she? So Mac told police that he'd been with Betty. He picked her up, the two hung out, and then he drove her home and he dropped her off in front of her house at midnight. He says that he then drove away. He did not wait for her to get inside. Police did not really believe Mac's story though, so they actually took him out of the school and they took him to the police station to question him further. And after about an hour of being interrogated, Mac turned to his father. His father, because he was a minor, was there with him during the questioning, and he confessed to killing Betty Williams. So he led police officers to his father's hunting property that was about 25 miles outside of town and showed them where he had killed Betty. And as they started to, walk through the area and come upon a stock tank, they noticed that the entire ground was covered in it. So police then did something which I found to be very strange, and this is how it was reported though, so I guess this is how it happened, but they asked Mac to get in this water and to retrieve Betty's body, and he did, which is just Super, super weird. Mac told police that on the night of March 21st, 1961, he went and he picked up Betty, and the two of them drove the 30 minutes or so out to his father's hunting property with the sole intention of Mac killing Betty per Betty's request. Mac says that Betty was in good spirits and kept talking about how happy she was going to be when she was dead and how awesome heaven was going to be. Mac says that the two parked his car next to the stock tank and they sat in the car and talked for a while before getting out and walking down towards the water. He says that she was shivering. He says that Betty asked him for a kiss to remember him by, and the two kissed. So Mac was arrested and the news spread quickly, and the response from the community was honestly shameful. People started to say horrible things about Betty, how she was no good and had tricked Mac into killing her. So this is like clearly first-degree murder, right? He planned this killing, even if he did do it because she asked. He brought the gun, he brought the ammo, he brought the rope, he brought the weights, and then he shot her in the head. And this would have been such an intense shooting. Like, think about it, a shotgun, 2 per temple. And then when police asked him about it, he was unmoved and unremorseful and didn't seem affected, which is like, even though this seems like a pretty straightforward first-degree murder, right? Mac's family got an attorney, and the attorney that they got was like a really, really good attorney. He was known as like a wonder boy and had not yet lost any of his criminal cases. So this attorney decided that his method for getting Mac off as not guilty of this crime was claiming that Mac was temporarily insane at the time that he committed a murder. Now, I read that at this time in Texas law, if you were able to prove that you were temporarily insane at the time of the murder, you would just essentially be found, you know, you wouldn't even stand trial for your crime, and you would just essentially be free, which I don't know if it's still like that. Anyways, to a lot of people's surprise, the judge actually granted the defense this pre-trial hearing to determine whether or not Mac was temporarily insane at the time of the murder, and this was like a big deal, and the courtroom was like packed with people who just wanted to like be there to see it happen, and packed with like girls who were obsessed with Mac. They called them Mac girls. He had groupies like Richard Ramirez. It is so gross. And during this hearing, they actually used that letter that Betty had written for Mac, the one that, you know, cleared him of any liability. They used this at trial, and the defense attorney essentially said that Betty had become their best witness for the defense, which is just so sad. And her family, man, her poor family was there during all of this and had to hear all of this. In the end, it was determined that Mac was temporarily insane at the time that he killed Betty, and the crowd roared and Mac started to cry, and people ran over to him to like hug him and support him and be there for him. And while all this is happening, Betty's parents snuck out the back and avoided that whole circus. The prosecution was not satisfied with this result. Obviously, how could they be? And the prosecutor actually ended up appealing this decision with the Texas Supreme Court on the grounds that the judge who granted the trial in the first place did not have the authority to do so. In 1962, the Supreme Court actually did agree with the prosecution, and the judgment was vacated, and it was ordered that there would be a new trial. Mac would stand trial for the murder of Betty, and double jeopardy wasn't an issue in this case because the initial trial was not to determine his innocence or his guilt, just his mental capacity during the time of the crime. So the second trial started, and it was moved to another place far away because they wanted to try to ensure that Mac could get a fair trial. And even though the trial was moved so far away, the defense had no trouble getting that courthouse packed with supporters of Mac and witnesses for Mac, and the witnesses that they had were strong. And in the end, John Mac Herring was found not guilty, and he was free. Instead of John being seen in a negative light and kind of ostracized, he was celebrated and he was embraced and he was sort of babied, and Betty's memory was tarnished and people had nothing but negative things to say about her. Even adults in the community had bad things to say about her, calling her just like trash and saying that he did what he did because she forced him and made him, and it was all her fault. And that, my friends, is the story of the kiss and kill murder, the murder of 17-year-old Betty Williams. And anyways, guys, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That's tight. You're tight. Please, for the love of God, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you in my next video.